The stagecoach rolled into Dry Creek just as the wind kicked up a curtain of dust that made the town shimmer like a mirage. Wooden buildings baked in the noonday sun, their shadows sharp and lean across the cracked earth. Horses tied to hitching posts swished their tails, restless and sweaty. A tinny piano drifted from the saloon, off-key and lazy. No one paid much attention to the incoming coach until it stopped. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped down, her black boots settling in the dirt with a hesitant crunch. She wore a simple traveling dress the color of dried roses, and a sun-bleached bonnet pulled low over her face. In her gloved hands, she clutched a carpet bag and a folded letter sealed with red wax. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like someone expecting to be judged. Julia Cross had never seen a town so dry, nor people who stared so hard. She kept her right side turned slightly away from the gathering glances, the way she always did. That side of her face still bore the faint scar that curved like a question mark just under her blind eye. She had learned how to tilt her head, how to smile just enough, how to disappear while standing in plain sight. But she was here now. She had traveled hundreds of miles through storms and sleepless nights, through towns where the only kindness she received came from stray dogs and tired children. All for this final chance at something resembling a life. A boy in suspenders shouted, "Mail order brides here," and laughter spilled from the saloon like sour whiskey. Julia's heart climbed up her throat. She kept her gaze straight ahead, toward the tall man leaning against a post by the general store. His name was Thomas Brigg. He had sent the letter 3 months ago, neatly written in slanted cursive. A man of 37 seeking a God-fearing, quiet woman to help tend cattle and house. No frills, no fuss. It wasn't romantic, but it had been her only offer, and she'd accepted it with both hands. Brigg didn't move as she approached. He was taller than she remembered from the picture, broader too, with a pocked face and eyes like cold nails. Julia paused before him and offered the letter. "Mr. Brigg," she said softly. "I'm Julia." He took the letter, scanned it, then lifted his eyes to her face. Without a word, he reached forward and flipped her bonnet back. The gasp from the onlookers was instant. Sunlight caught the milky white of her blind right eye, a faded blue-gray that never quite focused. The scar beneath it seemed to stretch under the scrutiny. Brigg's mouth curled. "You didn't say you were defective," he muttered. Julia's spine straightened. "I didn't know it needed saying." Brigg spat to the side. "I'm not Maureen, a half-blind woman. I sent for a wife, not a beggar with baggage." A few snickers followed. The boy from earlier cackled. Someone tossed out, "Maybe she'll make a good scarecrow." Julia's hands tightened on the handle of her bag, but she didn't move. Her cheeks burned, but she wouldn't give them tears. "Not here. Not again. I came here in good faith," she said, voice low and even. "Your letter promised." "My letter said I wanted someone whole," he interrupted. "You misled me. This ain't gonna happen." With that, he tossed the letter into the dirt at her feet and turned away. His boots thudded up the saloon steps as laughter chased him like dust in the wind. Julia stood frozen. The letter that had once held her future now lay smudged and torn. Slowly, she bent, picked it up, brushed the dirt from it with trembling fingers. No one came to her aid. No one offered comfort. She was just another curiosity passing through. She turned and walked down the road, not knowing where to go, only knowing she couldn't cry. Not here, not with her eyes on her back. Her boots scuffed along the edge of the street, and each step felt heavier than the last. "Ma'am." The voice was quiet but firm, a low drawl from across the road. She stopped. Across the street, under the shade of the barber's awning, a man lounged against a post. Dust-covered duster, worn boots, hat pulled low. His face was shadowed, but the grin was unmistakable, lopsided, amused, but not unkind. "You still got that letter?" he asked, tipping his head. Julia blinked. "Why?" "Because if Brigg won't marry you, maybe I will." A ripple went through the few people still watching. The laughter halted. Someone muttered, "That's Cole Ramsey." Her grip on the carpet bag shifted. "You're joking." He stepped forward, hands raised in surrender. "Not at all. I'm dead serious. You came all this way. Shame to waste a good dress on a man like Brig. She eyed him carefully. His coat was dusty, and the revolver on his hip was real, not for show. He had a relaxed posture, but she could tell he was the kind of man who watched everything, even while joking. His eyes, when the hat's shadow lifted, were a quiet kind of steel. "I don't know you," she said. "You didn't know Brig either," he replied. "Least I won't throw your letter in the dirt." The sun was blistering. The silence stretched. She looked around and realized something terrible. There were no choices left. Not if she didn't want to go back. And she wouldn't go back. "What do you want in return?" she asked flatly. He grinned. "Ma'am, I want someone who can ride, shoot if needed, and doesn't faint at the sight of blood. You look like you've had your fill of men who talk too much and do too little." That about right. That made her pause. He wasn't wrong. "Where would we go?" "I got a piece of land up near Bitter Hollow," he said. "Not much, but it's mine. Cabin, horses, few chickens, and no one else there to judge you." "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Cole shrugged. "Because I've known what it feels like to be looked at like you don't belong. And because I don't like Brig's face." She almost smiled. The tension in her shoulders didn't leave, but it shifted, like a weight adjusting to a new position. "What's your name?" she asked. "Cole Ramsey." Her heart beat faster, not from fear this time, but from the strangeness of the moment. A door had slammed shut, and somehow another cracked open. "I don't need charity," she said. "And I'm not offering any," he replied. "You want to come with me? We do things fair. I'll treat you right. But you pull your weight." "I always have." He nodded once. "Then it's settled." They shook hands like two gamblers agreeing on a deal. She didn't know who this man was, really. He could be a criminal, a liar, or worse. But there was something honest in the way he didn't flinch when he looked at her. He didn't pity her. And that was more than she'd gotten from anyone in a long time. "Give me 10 minutes," he said. "Need to settle up in town. Then we'll ride." She waited while he disappeared into the general store. Someone tried to approach her, a woman in a bonnet with sympathetic eyes. But Julia turned away. She didn't need sympathy. She needed motion. 10 minutes later, Cole returned with a horse saddled for her and a small bag of supplies. He handed her a canteen. "You ride." "I manage." "Good. It's a long road." They rode out together, side by side, the town shrinking behind them. The sun was lower now, slanting shadows across the road. A hawk circled high above. Somewhere in the distance, thunder grumbled. Julia didn't look back. She didn't know what lay ahead. But for the first time in years, she felt the smallest flicker of something dangerous and unfamiliar. Hope. And as they rode, she kept her blind eye facing forward, daring the world to look her in the face and say she wasn't enough. Let it try. The horses moved at a steady pace, hooves thudding against hard dirt, stirring up small clouds with each step. Julia didn't speak much at first, eyes locked ahead, her mind still caught between disbelief and quiet calculation. Cole Ramsey rode beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world, occasionally glancing over to make sure she hadn't changed her mind and bolted. She hadn't. Not because she trusted him. Not yet. But because there was nothing to run back to. And, more importantly, something in his manner told her he wouldn't flinch when things got hard. By dusk, the horizon blushed with pink, and Cole led them off the trail toward a small camp nestled against a cluster of boulders. It wasn't much, a fire pit surrounded by stones, a canvas roll to sleep on, and a battered kettle, but it felt oddly settled, like someone who knew how to survive without asking permission. Julia sat cross-legged near the fire, while Cole struck sparks into dry kindling. The flames rose up with a soft hiss, casting a golden light over her face. She kept her bonnet off now, the way Cole never once looked away from her scar, giving her an odd comfort. He hadn't asked about it, hadn't prodded, hadn't pretended not to notice. Just accepted it like one might a crooked tree or a chipped cup. There. Real. Unimportant to the usefulness of the thing itself. "You got a quiet way about you," Cole said as he poured beans into a dented tin pot. "I've learned when not to waste words." He nodded as though that answer satisfied something inside him. "You always this calm after getting humiliated in the middle of town?" She didn't flinch. If I fell apart every time someone saw my eye and judged me, I'd never get out of bed. That's so. He gave her a sideways grin. Then you're tougher than half the men I've met. She said nothing for a moment. Then, is this what you do? Ride around rescuing broken things? Cole's hand froze mid-stir. The pot clinked as he set the spoon down. You ain't broken, Julia. You're just not polished like they want. Makes them nervous. She studied him under firelight. His face was weathered, jaw rough with stubble, his eyes not cold, but not warm either. Watchful, like a man who'd once been hunted. You knew Brig wouldn't take me. I guessed. Then why offer? He leaned back, resting his weight on one elbow. Because I saw a woman standing on her own 2 feet when she could have folded. You didn't cry, didn't plead. You just picked up your letter and walked. That told me all I needed. Maybe I was too stunned to cry. Maybe. Still, he added, you walked proud. A faint smile tugged at her lips. She hadn't meant it as pride, but survival often wore the same coat. They ate quietly after that. The beans were bland, but warm. She watched the flames, letting their dance soothe her nerves. The sky above turned into a dome of ink, stars pinpricking the darkness. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped. The wind whispered through the grass, like secrets being traded. You always alone out here? She asked eventually. Cole poked at the fire with a stick. Most times. I work where I can do what I need. Got a patch of land that doesn't ask much for me. No wife. He shook his head. Had a woman once. Long time ago. She's gone now. Julia didn't press. She understood grief that settled into the bones and turned to silence. Some things didn't need explaining. You ever been married? He asked. She shook her head. I've had offers. None that weren't soaked in pity or cruelty. He looked at her long then. I ain't off Aaron either. She met his eyes and held them. I know. He smiled, faint and real. Let's ride at first light. It's a ways to Bitter Hollow, and I'd rather not get caught in the open. Caught by who? He hesitated. Let's just say there are folks I've crossed who remember my name. Most won't come this far. Some might. You an outlaw? Was, he said simply. Not anymore. Don't wear that life well. She nodded slowly. You planning to tell me what you did? Only if it starts to matter. That was fair. She unrolled her blanket and lay back, staring at the stars. They shimmered like flakes of ice, impossibly far, impossibly bright. She could still hear the laughter from Dry Creek echoing in her head, but it was quieter now, softened by the fire's warmth and Cole's steady breathing nearby. Sleep came in fits. Dreams rolled through her like tumbleweeds, flashes of her father's disappointed eyes, her mother's soft voice, the first time a boy pulled away from her kiss after seeing her eye. Waking up beside a man who didn't flinch was something new, and it sat on her chest like a question. By mid-morning, they'd put 20 miles behind them. The trail bent into a valley where red rock towers loomed like broken teeth, and the sun spilled over them in golden streaks. Birds circled high above, and the distant call of hawks followed them as they passed a dried-up creek bed. They stopped beneath a twisted oak for water. Julia dismounted and stretched her legs. Cole handed her the canteen. You ride well, he said. Most folks get sore after the first hour. I was raised on horses, she replied. I used to pretend I'd ride west and never come back. What stopped you? My parents. Expectations. A church full of whispers. He raised a brow. They didn't like your eye. They thought it was a punishment. My mother used to cover it with a patch for church. Said it made people uncomfortable. And you believed them? I believed I was lucky to be allowed to stay in the pews at all. Cole cursed softly under his breath. People can be ugly, can't they? Yes, she said. But not as ugly as pretending you're loved when you're not. He looked at her like he wanted to say something more, but a sudden sound snapped their attention. A snap of a twig. Cole's hand moved fast to his revolver. He pulled her down, behind the horses, just as 2 men stepped out from the brush, rifles aimed low, but ready. Well, the first one drawled. Ain't you Cole Ramsey? The second man was younger, but meaner in the eyes. Heard you might be passing through. Cole kept his voice level. Don't want trouble, boys. Too late for that, the older one said. Mitch Carlson's still mad you cost him that shipment last year. That wasn't me. Don't matter. You're the closest thing to justice he'll get. Julia didn't wait for instructions. She slipped Cole's spare rifle from the saddlebag and took position behind the water trough. Her heart pounded, but her hands didn't shake. The first shot rang out. Cole rolled behind a boulder, returned fire. The horses screamed and reared. Julia squinted, aimed, fired. Her shot grazed the younger man's arm, sending him behind cover with a curse. "Damn," he yelled. "That woman's shooting." Cole glanced at her, stunned. She reloaded quickly, jaw tight. "Don't stop now," she muttered. "Keep him pinned." He grinned despite the bullets. "Remind me not to make you mad." Gunfire cracked across the rocks. Dust rose. Then silence. The men were gone, vanished back into the hills, but not before leaving a warning. "You watch your back, Ramsey," one shouted. "You'll bleed for what you did." Julia wiped sweat from her brow, adrenaline still coursing through her. Cole holstered his gun, breathing hard. "You saved my damn life." "I told you," she said, voice cool. "I manage." They rode in silence for a while after that. The tension hadn't gone, but something else had risen between them. Something solid. A thread of trust, barely formed, but real. At camp that night, they didn't speak of the fight. Instead, they shared coffee and dry bread, and Julia finally asked, "What did you really do, Cole?" He stirred the fire. "I used to run jobs. Pickups, deliveries. Harmless stuff, until it wasn't. One day, a family got caught in the middle of a deal gone bad. A girl younger than you. She didn't make it. She waited. I walked away after that. Told myself I'd never let my name be used to hurt someone again." "That's why you helped me?" He looked over. "Maybe. Or maybe I just saw someone who reminded me what it feels like to carry your scars out in the open." She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The fire between them crackled like an old friend, and in that moment, silence said enough. Later, as she drifted to sleep under the stars, she felt the world shift again. Not back to what it was, but toward something new. Not safety, not love, not yet, but possibility. And sometimes that's more than enough to keep going. The valley narrowed as they rode deeper into Bitter Hollow. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and distant water, and Julia felt the weight of civilization lifting from her shoulders with every mile they put behind them. It had been 4 days since Dry Creek and the ambush. 4 days of riding, talking in careful dozes, and learning how to move like a pair of wolves that had learned to trust each other's silence. Cole pointed ahead with the butt of his rifle. "See that ridge? Just beyond it's the cabin. Don't blink. It's small." Julia nodded. Her hands were steady on the reins, her face flushed from sun and wind, but there was something stronger behind her eyes now. A quiet steel that had begun to surface when she held her ground behind that trough. They crested the ridge. The land dropped into a small bowl-shaped clearing surrounded by dark trees, and a stream winding like a silver snake through it. The cabin was there, weathered single-roomed, with smoke curling from its crooked chimney. A paddock held 2 horses. Chickens scratched near a garden. The place looked worn, but alive. Julia couldn't speak at first. There was a gravity to this little place, like it had waited for her. "You live here alone?" she finally asked. Cole nodded. "Off and on. Some winters I sleep with the horses. Some I sleep under the stars. Depends how safe the air feels." And now, his eyes scanned the horizon, still deciding. She dismounted and walked slowly toward the cabin. A door that leaned just a little off its hinges. A window patched with wax paper. And yet, it felt like home in a way she'd never known, because it didn't pretend to be perfect. It simply was. "I'll fetch water," she said, and before he could offer help, she was gone. Cole watched her walk with purpose toward the stream, boots crunching on the gravel. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for orders. He liked that more than he wanted to admit. He stabled the horses, fed the chickens, and chopped a stack of kindling before she returned with 2 filled canteens and a look that said she'd already memorized the landscape. That night, they sat by the hearth, a stew simmering in a black pot, the fire spitting every now and then like it had something to say. Cole leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You planning to stay?" Julia stirred the pot. "I don't have anywhere else." "That's not the same as choosing." She met his gaze. "Then, yes, I'm choosing." They didn't speak for a long time after that. Just listened to the fire. When she finally crawled onto the bedroll near the hearth, her last thought before sleep was that no one had ever asked her what she chose before. The next morning was calm. Birds sang. The sky promised a clear day. Cole was already outside when Julia stepped onto the porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. He was feeding the horses, his movements efficient, practiced. "Coffee," she called. "I'll never say no to that." She poured 2 mugs and stepped into the yard, handing him one. He took it without hesitation. There was no awkwardness, no forced conversation. They didn't need it. But peace, as Julia had learned, was always temporary. Just before noon, smoke curled on the far horizon. Cole saw it first. He went stiff. Julia turned, following his gaze. "That's not a cooking fire," he said. "It's too dark." A few minutes later, the first flames came into view, red and writhing, dancing on the barn's roof. Cole swore and bolted toward it. Julia was right behind him. They reached the barn just as the blaze roared higher, fed by the dry timbers and summer wind. The horses inside screamed. Cole didn't pause. He yanked the barn door open and vanished into the smoke. Julia hesitated only a second before grabbing a dampened burlap sack and racing in after him. The heat hit like a wall. The air was thick with ash and smoke, the flames clawing at the rafters above. Cole had already untied the first horse, slapping its flank to send it fleeing. The second thrashed wildly. Julia grabbed the lead and tugged hard, using her voice, low and calm, even as her lungs burned. The horse hesitated, then followed her out just as a beam collapsed behind them with a deafening crack. Outside, she gasped for air. Cole emerged, coughing, his shirt singed, eyes red-rimmed. They stood together, watching the barn devour itself. "I saw footprints," he said hoarsely. "Men. Recent." She didn't ask who. She already knew. Cole turned to her. This was a warning. From Mitch Carlson? Or someone working for him? Either way, they mean to finish what they started. She didn't blink. "Then we don't let them." He looked at her, like seeing her for the first time again. "You mean that?" "I've run enough in my life," she said. "I won't run from this." That night, they set up a perimeter. Cole gave her a shotgun and a lantern. He watched her move through the shadows, deliberate and steady. No panic, just presence. They slept in turns, the fire between them kept low. Neither said it aloud, but they both knew this place might not be safe much longer. In the morning, Julia found the garden destroyed. The chickens were gone. Tracks led back into the trees. Cole kicked the dirt. "They're baiting us." She knelt by the ruined fence. "What do they want?" "Me dead. You gone. Maybe both. Then they'll have to try harder." It was the first time she'd heard herself speak like that. And she meant it. Later, as they sat under the porch roof, rifles nearby, Cole turned to her. "I ever tell you about the girl who died?" She shook her head. "Her name was Mira, 14. Caught in a crossfire meant for me. I was running guns across a border town. Thought I was clever. Thought I could outsmart everyone." He stared into the distance. She was buying sweets. Just a kid. "I saw her fall. I remember the way the bag burst, candy everywhere. And I kept running." Julia didn't interrupt. "I tried to find her family later. Never could. So I walked away. Promised myself I'd never pick up another gun for the wrong reason." "And now?" she asked. He looked at her. "Now I've got the right reason." She nodded. "You do." The next few days were spent fortifying the cabin, setting traps, and preparing for what felt inevitable. They barely spoke, but the silence was charged, filled with the knowledge of what they were facing and what it meant to stand their ground. On the third night, just before dawn, they heard movement. Cole was already awake, rifle in hand. Julia moved like a shadow to her post near the window. 3 figures crept through the clearing. One carried a torch. The others moved low, rifles slung. Cole waited until they were halfway to the porch before firing. The torch dropped. A man screamed. The others scattered. Julia picked off the second one as he tried to flank the cabin, her shot clean and fast. The third man disappeared into the woods, leaving behind only his boot prints and blood. When it was over, the sun had barely risen. Julia stepped outside, heart pounding but steady. Cole joined her. "You all right?" She nodded. "You?" He smiled. "Never better." They stood in the aftermath, the air thick with gun smoke and morning dew. "This won't be the last time," she said. "No," he agreed. "But it might be the last time we're unprepared." They buried the bodies in silence. No prayers, just dirt and stone and the weight of doing what had to be done. That evening, as they sat near the fire again, Cole finally said, "You never told me how you lost your eye." She didn't look away. "When I was 8, I tried to ride a horse too big for me. Fell. Branch caught me across the face. My father said it was punishment for being prideful." Cole's jaw clenched. "Sounds like a fool." "He was," she said softly. "But he was the kind who fooled even himself." He reached across the space between them, hand open. She placed hers in his, and for the first time, it felt like her past wasn't something she had to carry alone. The fire cracked and hissed. Julia leaned back, watching the stars emerge one by one. The cabin still stood. The barn was gone. But so was her fear. And in its place was something new. Something worth fighting for. Julia stood at the cabin's edge with her boots planted firm in the dirt, the rising sun casting a long shadow behind her. Smoke still lingered in the air from the ambush 2 nights prior, and the clearing felt like it held its breath. Cole was inside, wrapping the graze on his arm with a stained linen strip, but his eyes never strayed far from the door. Neither of them spoke much now. There was too much to say, and no point in saying it. Survival had carved out its own language. She scanned the tree-line. The forest had grown quiet again, too quiet. Julia's instincts buzzed with tension. Something was coming, and it wasn't over yet. That afternoon, a rider approached from the southern ridge. Cole spotted him through his scope first. He didn't shoot. "Single man," he murmured from the porch. "Looks official." Julia stood beside him, arms folded, her blind eye hidden beneath her auburn hair, but her good eye sharp and clear. The man rode slowly, a tall figure in a long black duster, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He didn't wear the grit and chaos of Carlson's gang. He rode straight, stiff, with a folded document in his saddlebag. When he stopped 20 paces out, he dismounted and tipped his hat. "Cole Ramsey," the man called. Cole gave a tight nod, hand resting on the butt of his revolver. "Who's asking?" "Deputy Marshal Frank Garrett. I got business with the woman traveling with you, Julia Cross." Julia didn't flinch. She stepped forward, letting him see her face. "Miss Cross," he said, voice polite but cold. "You've got a warrant on you out of Kansas territory. Alleged desertion and fraud. Name signed by a Major Elgin Cross. Any relation?" "My brother," she said evenly. Cole turned to her, eyebrows drawn. She hadn't told him. Not this part. Julia's voice didn't waver. "He tried to sell me off to an officer after our father died. Said it would secure his future. When I ran, he filed papers saying I'd taken money, broken contract. I never saw a dime." Garrett shifted. "The warrant's real, but unofficial. It wasn't filed through the central office. More like a favor." Cole's jaw clenched. "And you rode all the way out here to honor a favor?" "I rode here to see if she's worth dragging back through 200 miles of hell. Thought I'd meet her face to face." "And?" Julia asked, folding her arms. Garrett studied her. She didn't look away. She didn't shrink. The sun caught her scar just right, highlighting the pale streak under her eye. "And I reckon I've seen enough to know that man back in Kansas has no claim on you worth a bullet," he said after a long pause. Relief didn't come right away. Julia knew better than to trust peace that arrived too easily. Garrett tipped his hat again. "Good luck to you both." He rode off, his figure swallowed by the hills. Inside the cabin, Julia sat by the fire, silent. Cole poured coffee into 2 tin mugs and handed her one. "You all right?" She nodded. I just hate being hunted, even by ghosts. You're not anymore. No, she said. Not today. The quiet was short-lived. By nightfall, the wind carried sound again. Hooves, the rustle of branches, the unmistakable clink of spurs. Cole was already loading his rifle before she stood. They're coming. Too many to count. Carlson didn't wait for subtlety. He came with 5 men, torches high, shouting, taunting from the edge of the woods. Ramsey, a voice called. You got something that belongs to me. And I don't mean your hide. Julia stepped out before Cole could stop her. She stood just past the porch, the firelight washing her in gold and shadow. She didn't carry a gun this time. Just herself. I'm not property, she shouted. I don't belong to anyone. You want me? Come and bleed for it. Cole moved beside her. His revolver was steady, eyes tracking every shadow. The reply was a snort. You've got a mouth for a crippled girl. You've got nerves for a coward, she shot back. And that was it. The first shot came from the trees. Cole tackled her to the dirt just as it split the air above her. Then chaos erupted. Flames from torches lit the yard in flickering orange. Gunfire cracked. Cole fired twice, downing a man as he rushed from behind a wagon. Julia rolled toward the cabin and grabbed the rifle from the doorframe. She didn't aim to wound. Another shot echoed from a forest. Julia fired back, and silence followed. She moved fast, never still, eyes sharp and unrelenting. Carlson emerged last. Big, scarred, with a face like split leather, and hands that held the gun like he was born with it. He fired at Cole, missing only because Julia screamed his name at the last second. Cole ducked, then returned fire. But Carlson didn't fall. He moved forward slowly, deliberate, like he wanted them to see him coming. Julia stepped from behind the cabin, eyes locked on him. Carlson sneered. You really think you scare me, girl? No, she said. But this might. She fired. The shot hit his shoulder and spun him halfway. He dropped to one knee, stunned. Cole tackled him before he could lift the gun again, fists flying. The 2 men wrestled in the dirt, grunting, cursing. Julia ran to them, rifle raised, unsure where to shoot. Carlson slammed Cole's head against a stone, rising like some beast from a nightmare. Blood ran down his temple. Cole, Julia shouted. Carlson turned, breath heaving. That's the best you've got, he growled. She didn't answer. She stepped forward, rifle lowered now. No, she said quietly. But I don't need better. I just need to remind you of something. He hesitated. I'm the one who made it out. I'm the one who lived after everyone turned their back. I'm the one who stood when they tried to bury me. You can't break me. He lunged. And that was his mistake. Cole had played possum. As Carlson charged, he rose behind him and slammed the butt of his revolver against his skull. The outlaw dropped like a sack of meat. Julia didn't flinch. She stood over the body, breathing hard. It was over. The fire crackled. The smell of blood and sweat thick in the air. The clearing was littered with the fallen. 2 horses bolted. A torch smoldered near the garden. Cole leaned against the porch post, blood trailing down his cheek. You all right? He asked hoarsely. Julia looked down at her hands. Steady. Strong. I think I've been all right for a while, she said. He gave a crooked smile. Then you're ahead of me. They buried the bodies at dawn. No prayers, just dirt and fire and long shadows. Julia didn't mourn them. Not one. She just felt a stillness creep into her bones, a silence that didn't scream anymore. Later, she sat on the porch with a blanket over her lap and a cup of coffee in her hands. Cole sat beside her. I'm not the girl who stepped off that stagecoach, she said softly. I know, he said. I'm stronger now. You always were. You just stopped hiding it. She leaned her head against his shoulder, letting the silence say the rest. After a while she asked, What now? We rebuild. We make it better. We keep going. I'd like that. He turned to her. Julia, I never asked you, not proper, but I'd like to. Will you marry me? She didn't laugh, didn't cry, just nodded. I think we already did everything backwards, she said. But yes, I will. The fire crackled again. The birds sang louder now. The wind didn't feel like a warning anymore, just a breeze. Julia stood, looked out over the land. Scar still there. Blind eye still hers. But now, neither of them made her small. She was the one-eyed bride who didn't bow. And never would. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes, the people the world tries hardest to break are the ones who rise strongest from the dust. The lace tore with a rip that echoed louder than the gasps. Sarah Callahan stood at the altar in her mother's borrowed wedding dress, her cheeks flushed crimson, her breath caught halfway between a sob and a scream. Tom Rourke, the man she'd nursed, cooked for, helped build fences with, and foolishly loved, stared down at her with the expression of a man who'd just stepped in something foul. His voice boomed across the little frontier church, dripping disdain. "I can't do it. I ain't marrying no fat cow." It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it. Like she was livestock gone to rot. Like she should have known better than to believe a man like him would ever really want a woman like her. Someone tittered in the back. Another coughed, covering a laugh. Chairs scraped. A child whispered, "Mama, why she crying?" Sarah stood frozen, corset half split, a thin line of skin showing through where the seam had given out under pressure. Her hands, gloved and trembling, clutched the bouquet tighter, thorns biting into her palms. She didn't bleed. Not visibly. She didn't say a word. Just turned and walked out, slow, deliberate steps on heels that sank into the dusty floorboards. The minister muttered something behind her. The organ player stopped playing. Outside, the sun hit her like a slap. She walked down the church steps and into the town of Fair Crossing, Wyoming, population 312, most of whom had just seen her heart crushed like a bug under a boot. A voice called out from behind, "Hey, Miss Callahan, you gonna be auctioning off that cake?" She didn't look back. Her house stood at the edge of town, a two-room homestead with a cracked chimney and a windmill that creaked whenever it felt like it. She made it through the front door, kicked it closed, and finally let out a sound, a raw, ugly noise that wasn't quite a cry and wasn't quite a scream. She ripped off the gloves first, then the veil, tore at the corset until it dangled like a defeated white flag. The dress, now muddy and torn, got yanked over her head and flung into the corner like it had betrayed her. Sarah collapsed into the wooden chair near the stove and stared at the embers from the morning's fire. Her hands shook, her lips trembled, but her eyes were dry. Grief had burned through her already years ago, when her first husband died in the spring raids. What she felt now wasn't grief. It was something colder, heavier, shame. Not for her size. Not really. She'd never been small. But she'd let herself believe she could be wanted, not just for her biscuits or her quiet company, but really wanted. Stupid. She wiped her face with the hem of her petticoat and stared at the wall where her late husband's rifle still hung. The man hadn't been perfect, but he'd never once called her names. Never made her feel less than. There was a knock at the door. 3 slow raps. She thought of ignoring it. Thought about grabbing the rifle. Instead, she dragged herself upright and opened it. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with road dust on his boots and sun in his hair. He held his battered hat in one hand, head bowed just enough to be polite. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and rough like gravel over whiskey. "Name's Eli Harper. Heard from the barkeep you sometimes take boarders." She blinked. "That's so." "If the offer's still good," he said, "I can pay a week in advance. Do my share of work." Sarah leaned against the doorframe, folding her arms, ignoring the shameful way her corset-less chest sagged under her nightgown. "You always show up on a woman's doorstep, right after she gets humiliated in front of the whole town?" Eli tilted his head, calm. "Didn't know about that." He paused, eyes flicking to her bare feet, the red marks on her arms, the torn lace behind her. "But I ain't blind." A pause stretched between them like a taut rope. "Stable's yours," she said finally, voice clipped. "You'll fix the fence, haul water, and feed the chickens. No drinking, no cards, and no trying to talk to me less I talk first." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Understood. She slammed the door without another word. That night, she didn't cry. Not even once. But she also didn't sleep. Sarah Callahan had been rejected, spat on, and laughed at by nearly every man this town had to offer. First for being too poor, then for being too widowed, then for being too fat. Let him laugh. Let him talk. She didn't need anyone, especially not a dusty stranger with good manners and quiet eyes. But when the rooster crowed and she found the woodpile chopped, water hauled, and the porch swept clean, she hesitated. That fence hadn't stood that straight in months. By mid-morning, Eli was hammering new planks into the side corral. Shirt off, sweat on his brow, muscles working like a man who knew hard labor well. She brought him a cup of water, said nothing. He drank it with a nod. Rourke was a fool, he said casually. She stiffened. You did hear. Eli set the cup down. Folks in town can't help themselves. But I didn't come here to pity you, ma'am. She stared at him, ready to retort, to slap, to slam the door in his face again. But what came out instead was, he said I was a fat cow. In front of God and everyone. Eli squinted at her, serious. Ma'am, I seen cows. None of 'em got fire in their eyes like you do. A huff escaped her lips. Almost a laugh. Almost. For the next 3 days, they kept to a rhythm. Quiet mornings, hard work, shared meals. He never commented on how much she ate or didn't. Never stared too long. He saw her, but not like the others did. And she hated how much she noticed him back. On the 4th day, the dress still sat in the corner like a ghost. Sarah picked it up, touched the torn seam. Eli sat on the porch, whittling. You plan to burn it? He asked without looking. Thought about it. Don't. She blinked. Why not? 'Cause it ain't the dress that betrayed you. It's the man. She said nothing. But that night, she stuffed the dress into the stove and watched it burn. Eli watched her from the doorway. Said nothing. But she saw the way his jaw tensed when the flames caught. That evening, the wind picked up. A storm rolled across the plains, thunder low and mean. She heard footsteps on the porch. Eli's silhouette framed by lightning. I brought in the chickens, he said. Storm will be bad. She nodded. Then, after a pause, you can come in. Inside, he stood near the hearth. The firelight made his scars visible, one along the forearm, another beneath the collarbone. She hadn't asked. He hadn't offered. Your husband, Eli began, then hesitated. Dead 2 years, she said. Killed by bandits. Left me the house, a mule, and a heap of debts. You been surviving all this time alone? She looked at him, sharp. What makes you think I ain't capable? His answer was quiet. I don't. She didn't thank him. Not yet. But her heart did something strange. Before he went back to the stable, he turned and said, For what it's worth, I think you're more than enough woman for any man with half a spine. Then he left. And for the first time in days, Sarah Callahan smiled. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the storm in her chest finally began to settle. She wasn't small. She wasn't soft. And she sure as hell wasn't done yet. The man who'd humiliated her would hear no apology. And the stranger who'd arrived with nothing but manners and mud on his boots? Well, he just unknowingly opened the first page of a story he wasn't prepared for. And neither was she. But it was happening. Like the wind before a fire. Like the hush before a bullet leaves the chamber. Something was coming. And it would not be gentle. The storm rolled out overnight, but the morning came in gray and sullen, hanging over the plains like a warning. Sarah stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the clouds move slow over the hills. Her breath made small ghosts on the glass. In the yard, Eli split logs like the world might fall apart if he didn't keep moving. He worked in silence, always did. No grunts, no fuss. Just clean swings of the axe, each piece of wood flying in half with a sort of calm violence. She watched longer than she meant to, then turned away, cheeks hot. 2 weeks since the wedding that wasn't. 2 weeks since the man in the church humiliated her. And 2 weeks since Eli Harper knocked on her door and stepped quietly into her life like a ghost that refused to leave. He hadn't made a single pass at her. Not a leer, not a compliment. Just kindness. Respectful distance. And that, somehow, made her feel even more naked. He'd fixed the fence. Repaired the barn door. Started patching the roof without being asked. He moved like a man used to hard labor, but there was grace there too. Precision. Like he'd been trained to do more than just mend things. Sometimes she caught him looking at the horizon a little too long. Like he expected something out there to come riding hard. He had the look of a man who didn't just leave things behind. He buried them. That morning, she left his breakfast by the edge of the table and didn't say a word. He came in after finishing the logs, washed at the pump, and sat to eat. She lingered near the stove, pretending to sort beans that didn't need sorting. "You always this quiet?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. Eli looked up, chewing. "Only when I got nothing worth saying." She gave him a look. "Is that your way of calling me a gossip?" "No, ma'am. Just my way of saying I ain't here to fill the air with nonsense." His tone wasn't sharp, but firm. It landed somewhere between teasing and truth. She smirked and went back to sorting nothing. "You military?" she asked after a beat. He paused with the biscuit halfway to his mouth. "Used to be." She nodded slowly. That made sense. The way he watched everything. The way he moved. The discipline in his silence. He didn't offer more, and she didn't pry. After breakfast, she saddled the mule and rode into town to sell eggs and flour, leaving Eli behind to mend the henhouse gate. As she trotted down Main Street, people turned to stare. They always did now. Some looked away when she met their gaze. Others smirked. One woman whispered something to her friend behind a hand fan. Sarah kept her spine straight, her chin high. Let them whisper. Let them laugh. She'd survived worse than talk. At the general store, old Mr. Crumley took her money without a word and didn't ask how she'd been. She thanked him anyway. Civility cost nothing, and she refused to give them the bitter woman they expected. Outside, a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Well, if it ain't the runaway bride." Tom Rourke leaned against the hitching post, boot kicked up, arms crossed, hat tilted just so. He looked exactly the same. Clean-shaven, boots polished, face smug. But Sarah didn't feel the same at all. She kept walking. "You gonna act like you didn't hear me, sweetheart?" he called. She didn't turn. "I ain't your sweetheart." "Could have fooled me," he said, following. "That's not what you were saying when you asked me to stay the night after your birthday." She spun then, slow and cold. "You said you loved me." He smiled like it was a punchline. "Yeah, well, I lied." Sarah didn't slap him. She didn't cry. She just looked him dead in the eye and said, "Then you're even smaller than I thought." Tom's jaw twitched, just barely. He took a step closer. "You shacked up with that drifter yet? Heard you got some stranger living in your barn. What is he, your new bed warmer?" She didn't rise to it. Didn't blink. "He's a better man than you'll ever be. And he didn't have to try near as hard." Tom's eyes narrowed, but before he could spit something venomous, a voice cut through the tension. "You got a problem with her, you're gonna need to make it mine." Eli stood at the end of the boardwalk, coat open, hat low, hand resting just close enough to his belt to send a message. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It carried. Tom looked him over, clearly unimpressed. "This your new savior?" Eli didn't answer. Just walked slowly forward, step by step, calm and sure. He stopped beside Sarah and looked straight at Tom. "You said what you came to say. Now be smart. Walk away." Tom huffed a laugh, but he did just that. With a final sneer, he spat in the dirt and disappeared around the corner. Sarah exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "You didn't need to step in," she said, voice low. "Didn't do it for you," Eli replied. "Did it so I didn't have to see your mule kick him into a fence." She laughed before she could stop herself. A real one this time. And Eli smiled. Back at the homestead, things changed in small ways. She brought his coffee without making a show of it. He carved her a new kitchen spoon with a smooth handle that fit her hand just right. At night, they sat a little closer to the fire, talked a little more, laughed in quiet bursts that echoed like something trying to be reborn. Eli told her about his time in the war, how he'd been a scout, how he'd seen too much. He didn't tell it like a hero's tale, more like a confession. And Sarah listened, never judging, never interrupting. She told him about losing her husband, about burying him with her own hands because no one else came to help, about crying so hard she forgot what her own voice sounded like. They understood each other in the silence that followed. One night, thunder cracked in the distance again, and she found herself standing in the doorway, watching lightning ripple across the plains. Eli came up behind her, slow. "You always watch storms." "I like knowing what's coming," she said. He nodded. "Storms are honest. Don't pretend to be anything they're not." She looked at him, then really looked. "You got any more of that honesty in you?" His eyes softened. "I think about you more than I should." She swallowed hard. "Why?" "'Cause you're strong," he said. "And kind. And you've been put through hell, but still walk like you own the ground under you." Her voice cracked. "I'm not skinny. I'm not blind." They stood there for a long while, thunder rolling like drums in the distance. She whispered, "You planning to leave?" "I wasn't," he said. "But I reckon that depends." "On what?" "On whether I've got a reason to stay." And there it was. No big decorations. No poetry. Just raw truth hanging between them like lightning caught mid-flash. She reached out, touched his arm. "I don't know what this is yet, but I don't want to face it alone." He nodded once. "Then I won't go." The next morning, she made eggs. Real eggs, not just scraps. He brought in fresh-cut flowers, without saying where he found them. And they sat at the table like two people who'd stumbled into something they weren't sure they deserved, but were damn sure not going to run from. But just as they found their rhythm, it came. Hoofbeats. Fast. Hard. Wrong. Sarah stepped out, heart thudding. A lone rider approached, fast, dust cloud trailing behind like a warning flag. Eli emerged beside her, expression dark. "Who is that?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. But his hand went to his belt again. The rider pulled up sharp. His horse reared, then settled. The man on top wore a long coat and a cruel smile. "Well now," the stranger said, voice like broken glass. "Ain't this a cozy picture?" Eli didn't flinch. "What do you want?" The man's grin widened. "Want? Just chasing ghosts. Heard tell one was hiding out here." He looked at Sarah, then back at Eli. "Name's Bane. Bounty hunter." "You got a name, soldier." Sarah stepped between them. "He doesn't want trouble." Bane chuckled. "Oh, sweetheart. I am trouble." Eli stepped forward. "You got business, say plain." Bane's eyes glittered. "You deserted your post, Harper. Stole from your own. There's a price on your head, and I aim to collect." Sarah froze, turned to Eli. "Is that true?" Eli didn't answer. And just like that, everything changed. Again, the wind carried the silence like a noose pulled tight. Eli stood unmoving, his jaw clenched, hand loose at his side, not yet near the revolver, holstered at his hip, but close enough. Sarah's eyes darted between them, the dust-covered bounty hunter who called himself Bane and the man she had let into her home, into her quiet, aching heart. "I asked you a question," she said, voice hard and low. "Is it true?" Eli didn't answer. Not right away. Bane smiled with his teeth. "You didn't tell her? Oh, that's rich. She let a wanted man sleep on her land, under her roof. Bet you were counting on her being too sweet and soft to ask questions." "Shut your mouth," Eli said, voice so even it struck like a lash. Sarah stepped forward. "Eli," her voice cracked. "Please." He looked at her. Something passed behind his eyes, something raw and real. "I didn't desert," he said. "I disobeyed an order, when I couldn't follow." Bane laughed. "That's one way of saying it." Eli ignored him. "War ended, but men still suffered. My commander sent us to clean up loose ends, civilians, prisoners, people who didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. I refused. So they put the blame for the raid on me." Sarah felt the words hit her like hail on skin still healing. "So you ran." "I survived," Eli said. "Same thing out here." Bane dismounted, slow and casual, like a man confident in his advantage. His spurs sang against the dry earth. "That's a nice speech," he drawled. "But the law don't care about moral high ground. There's a bounty, and I plan on collecting." "You bring a warrant?" Sarah asked sharply. Bane raised an eyebrow. "Don't need one when you're a bounty hunter, sweetheart. He's worth more alive, but I'll settle for dead." Eli moved then, not for his gun, but between Sarah and Bane. "You're not taking me, today." Bane's hand twitched near his holster. "That a threat?" "That's a promise." Sarah swallowed hard. Her fingers clenched. "He's not a criminal," she said, loud enough for both men to hear. "And this is my land. You want blood, you'll find mine first." Bane gave her a slow, mocking clap. "Now that's love, huh? Protecting a killer, just 'cause he fixed your fence and looked at you like you weren't too big for him." Eli's gun was out so fast the air cracked. He pointed it straight at Bane's chest. "I don't miss," Eli said. Bane smiled. "Neither do I." But he backed away, boots crunching in the dust. "You've got 24 hours, Harper. I'll be back. With friends. Maybe then your pretty landlady'll realize you ain't worth dying for." He rode off in a cloud of dust and thunder. The moment stretched. Eli lowered the gun. Sarah exhaled like she hadn't in minutes. Inside the house, she poured herself a drink with shaking hands. Eli leaned against the doorframe, silent. "You should have told me," she said without looking at him. "I figured I'd have time." She turned, anger sparking. "Time? After everything we shared, you thought this could stay buried." "I didn't come here to start something, Sarah." "No, you just brought it right to my door," she snapped. "And now that man's coming back with killers, and this place, this home, is going to be the battleground." His voice was tired. "I'll leave." "No, you won't." Her voice cracked again. "If you leave, they'll still come looking. And if they don't find you, they'll burn this place down to punish me for hiding you." He stared at her for a long moment. Then we fight." She met his gaze. "Then we fight." That night they prepared. The farm hadn't seen use for war in years, but Sarah's late husband had left behind more than debt and grief. A few old rifles, a shotgun, powder and shot, traps rusty but usable. They lit no lamps, used the moonlight. Quiet steps, quick hands. Sarah rigged tripwires and broken bottles at the back of the barn. Eli set traps near the fence and posted lookout points with lanterns covered in red cloth. They dug in hour after hour, like people who knew what was coming. But when their hands met, passing tools, loading shells, something passed between them. Not panic, not even desperation. Resolve. At dawn, Sarah made coffee. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her heart had never been steadier. Eli walked in with his rifle slung across his back, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his eyes like flint. "They're coming." "How many?" "3. Maybe 4. Hard to tell through the dust." "They're fast." She nodded and handed him a biscuit. "Eat. Might be the last warm thing you get for a while." He smiled faintly. "You're calm." "I've been through worse," she said. "I buried my husband. I buried my pride. I can bury a few more men if I have to." The hoofbeats arrived just after breakfast. Bane led them, flanked by 2 other riders, hard-eyed men with rifles across their backs and cruelty in their faces. One had a jagged scar down his cheek. The other chewed tobacco and spat like he enjoyed the taste of death. They didn't wait. Shots rang out as they charged the front gate, trying to overwhelm fast. Sarah was already in position, crouched behind the woodpile, with her husband's shotgun braced against her shoulder. The first shot knocked the tobacco chewer clean off his horse. He hit the ground with a crunch and didn't get up. Eli took the second man with a clean shot to the leg, then finished him when he tried to crawl for cover. Blood sprayed across the dry grass. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Bane kept riding, zigzagging between trees, returning fire. His bullet struck the front porch post, splintering wood inches from Sarah's head. "You still think he's worth it?" he yelled. She didn't answer. She fired again, this time grazing his arm. He howled and ducked low. Eli took a shot and missed. Then Bane disappeared behind the barn. Silence. Sarah ducked low, her heart pounding in her ears. The air felt too thin. The world narrowed to the space between breath and sound. A creak behind her. She spun too slow. Bane slammed her against the wall of the coop, one arm pressing against her throat, the other lifting his revolver. "Told you," he hissed. "You picked the wrong horse." She gasped, struggling. "I've been wrong before." He grinned. Then this should feel familiar. A shadow passed behind him. Eli. The butt of his rifle cracked against Bain's skull with a sickening thud. Bain crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Sarah slid down the wall, coughing. Eli knelt beside her. You okay? She nodded, throat raw. I'm fine. You. He held up his arm. Blood oozed from a cut along his bicep. Just a scratch. Bain stirred with a groan. Eli stood. This ends now. Sarah caught his hand. Don't kill him. Let the town see what kind of coward he really is. Eli hesitated. Then nodded. They dragged Bain into town, tied at the back of Sarah's mule, his hands bound with fencing rope. He didn't fight, didn't speak, just hung his head. The townsfolk gathered like buzzards. Tom Rourke stood on the porch of the saloon, arms crossed, eyes wide as they approached. What the hell is this? Justice, Sarah said. She told them everything. Bain's threats, Eli's story, the truth behind the bounty, and the lies that put him on the run. Voices rose. Some muttered in doubt. Others nodded. Mr. Cromley, surprisingly, stepped forward and said, I remember that raid. I remember the story didn't add up. A lot of us did. And just like that, the wind shifted. Sarah turned to Eli. You don't have to run anymore. He looked around, cautious. Then, I still don't belong here. You belong with me, she said simply. If you want to. Eli stared at her, like the words had broken something loose inside him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then kissed her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks. It was real. And when they pulled apart, the town was quiet. Not from shock, but respect. They'd seen her shamed. They'd seen her mocked. Now they saw her win. Later that night, when the sun sank behind the hills and the world turned gold, they sat on the porch, side by side. Eli's arm was bandaged. Her throat still ached. But they were alive. She turned to him. Do you regret it? No, he said. But I was scared. Of what? Of being seen. Really seen. And still not being enough. Sarah took his hand. You're enough, Eli. Just like this. Just like me. He smiled. Then we'll stay. Build something. And for the first time in years, Sarah Callahan believed it. Not because someone told her. Not because she'd been chosen. But because she'd fought for it. And won. The morning light filtered through the cracked window, casting long golden lines across the floorboards. Sarah sat at the edge of the bed, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, the other resting on her thigh. She wasn't dressed yet, just a worn linen shift, frayed at the edges, the kind that clung to her shape in the gentle way only time-softened fabric could. Eli stood shirtless at the wash basin, running wet fingers through his hair, wincing slightly as water touched the healing cut on his arm. His back was a map of old scars, some long faded, some fresher. Not a patch of him had been left untouched by the world he came from. Sarah watched him, quiet. She knew every scar had a story he hadn't yet told, and maybe never would. That was fine. She didn't need the words. She'd seen him bleed for her. She'd seen him kill for her. That said more than stories ever could. I've got an idea, she said. He turned, towel slung over one shoulder. That so? Yeah. She sipped the coffee. Let's go to the registrar in town. Today. He paused, reading her. For what? She tilted her head, feigning innocence. To register the livestock. What else? He chuckled, low and slow, then crossed the room in 2 steps, kneeling in front of her. You sure? I wouldn't joke about livestock, she deadpanned. He rested his forehead against her knee, smiling into her skin. You want a quiet one? Just us, she said. No one to gawk. No one to whisper. Just you, me, and a stubborn mule that's probably going to die on the trail. Eli looked up, the light catching his eyes. I'll take it. It was just after noon when they rode into town, him on horseback, her atop the mule, both dressed in their Sunday best, the only nice clothes either of them owned. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her curves unapologetically, her hair pinned up, loose tendrils falling around her face. He wore a clean white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows and a gun belt that didn't clink when he walked. It didn't need to. It belonged. The town quieted as they passed. Sarah didn't flinch. She sat straight, chin high, her gaze steady and unashamed. If anyone had something to say, let them say it to her face. But they didn't. Not this time. The clerk at the registrar's office blinked twice when they stepped in, clearly not expecting them. Sarah signed her name clean across the page. Eli followed with steady strokes. They paid the small fee, shook hands with the wide-eyed deputy, and left without ceremony. The wind picked up as they exited, blowing dust through the street. Sarah turned her face into it, letting it sting her skin. There was a kind of freedom in it, raw, biting, but honest. They were halfway home when they saw the smoke. Eli pulled up short. That's too close. Sarah's stomach turned. The barn. He nodded once. Maybe more. They didn't speak again, just turned the horses and kicked hard, riding as fast as the trail allowed, urgency slicing through their hearts like a blade. When they reached the property, the damage was already done. The barn smoldered, its walls blackened, the roof collapsed inward. The chicken coop was scattered, broken eggs and feathers dotting the ground like an abandoned battlefield. The back fence was down, and hoof prints led away from the homestead. Sarah dismounted in silence. Her hands trembled, but her face didn't change. Eli knelt near the coop, brushing ash from the dirt. No livestock gone, he murmured. No bodies either. She stared at the barn, her jaw locked tight. They came to punish. Message sent, Eli said grimly, but not finished. He stood slowly. Tracks go east. Sarah turned to him, her voice flat. You going after them? I have to. Her fists clenched at her sides. Then I'm going too. Eli's eyes softened, but he didn't argue. He'd learned better than to try. They rode east, following the tracks. 2 horses, maybe 3. Light supply bags. They hadn't come to rob, just to destroy. The trail curved into the low hills, weaving through dry brush and shallow creek beds. After an hour, they heard voices. Low, male, laughing. Eli motioned for silence and dismounted, tying his horse to a tree. Sarah followed, quiet as shadow. They crept over a ridge and looked down. 3 men sat around a small fire, one stirring a tin pot, the other 2 playing cards on an overturned crate. None of them were Bane, but they carried his stench, careless cruelty, easy violence. Sarah saw it first. Her wedding dress, or what remained of it, hung from a stick, fluttering like a flag above their campsite. Dirty, ripped, blackened at the hem. Her breath caught. Eli touched her hand. Your call. She stared at the dress, at the men who'd stolen her peace, mocked her love, desecrated what little of her past she'd chosen to keep. She raised the shotgun. The blast rang out, deafening. The man with the pot dropped instantly, steam rising from where the shot tore through his chest. The other 2 scrambled for their rifles, but Eli was faster. 1 bullet caught the second in the leg. The third man dove behind a rock, firing wild. Sarah advanced, eyes locked, each step deliberate. The man she'd wounded tried to crawl away, muttering curses between sobs. She kicked his rifle away and stood over him. Why? He spat blood. We were just told to scare you. Bane said burn the barn, make the freak run again. Didn't say nothing about shooting. Eli stood nearby, silent, watching her. Sarah lowered the gun. You scared me. I didn't mean nothing by it. She hit him. Hard. The man crumpled, groaning. Eli approached. We take him back. No, Sarah said. He can limp behind or die where he lies. I don't care anymore. They tied up the third man, who surrendered without a fight, his face pale. Sarah took back her dress from the stick and threw it into the fire without blinking. On the ride home, the silence between her and Eli wasn't heavy. It was solid. Earned. At the homestead, they tended to what remained. The barn was gone, but the house stood. The mule was safe. The chickens had scattered but returned with some coaxing. That night, under the stars, they didn't speak much. Eli sat beside her on the porch steps, close but not touching. The fire crackled low inside the house, but out here, the moon bathed them both in silver. He turned to her. You're stronger than I'll ever be. She didn't look at him. That's not true. You forgave me. I didn't. Not yet, she said. But I'm trying. He nodded slowly. She reached out, taking his hand. You love me. I do. Even like this? She asked, her voice small for the first time. Especially like this, he said. She breathed deep, then leaned her head against his shoulder. The night was cool. The stars didn't care who stared back at them. And Sarah Callahan, once humiliated, once laughed at, once discarded like a broken trinket, was no longer waiting to be chosen. She chose. And she chose love that rode in not on white horses or promises, but on scarred backs and worn boots. Love that didn't flinch at fire. Love that helped rebuild what others tried to burn. And as the sky began to pale toward morning, she whispered into the dark, "Let them come again. Let the whole damn world come. I won't hide." Eli squeezed her hand. "Then neither will I." And so they sat, together, armed with scars and firelight, as the new day broke wide open over the hills.